Hello, everybody. My name is Vlad, and I'm a Creative 3D Evangelist here at Adobe. Thank you so much for joining this live stream. I'm going to be showing you some fun workflow where we're going to create a custom graphics for a t-shirt using Project Neo, Adobe Illustrator, and Substance 3D Stager. So that being said, let's get started. All right, so if you'd like to follow me on Behance or Instagram, here are my handles over here. It's greatly appreciated. I'm going to be posting some fun stuff every week. But what are we actually doing today? All right, so as I said, we're going to use these 3D tools, well, three different tools to create, going to be converted into a vector file, and it's going to allow us to bring it into Adobe Illustrator, where we're going to do some coloration. So then we're going to create different versions of that decal, so to speak. And then finally, we're going to use Substance 3D Stager to apply this as a texture on a 3D model of a shirt. And that way, we're going to be able to do, different coloration of the shirt and also try different variations of the decal itself. All right, so let's get started. So I'm just going to switch the tab over here. And now you can see that we are in Project Neo. So I am using my browser because Neo is a web-based 3D scene creator. So Neo allows you to create beautiful, whimsical scenes by using a bunch of primitives, which are listed over here on the left side. So you're essentially able to build up a scene using these primitives, and then you can move them around, transform them, and also blend them together in a certain way. Neo has been designed specifically to take the complexity away and to allow you to just be creative, right? So let's start building our scene. So first of all, I'm gonna turn off this frame over here on the right-hand side. So now we can kind of clearly see the viewport in the middle. So you are in a 3D space, which means you're able to move your camera around. So this is super easy. If you have a mouse, you can just orbit by using right mouse button as this. If you want to pan your camera around, you only need to click on the scroll and then you can just kind of pan around. And then if you want to zoom in and out, you can just use your scroll as this. All right. So if you want to interact with your objects in the scene, we need to select the Select tool, which is over here on the left-hand side. So all the tools are basically over here in this column, or you can hit V. So now I'm able to click and select my objects. You will notice that every time you click on an object, the properties of that object, or as we call them 3D shapes, is going to be shown on the right-hand side. So you have all the properties that you need. So I'm just going to delete everything and start from a fresh new scene. So we are going to build a little cityscape, which I call the Hope Town. So let's first change the background color. So we're going to go from this green to maybe something like baby blue. I want the sky. And so just one note here, the background can be a solid color, but also it can be a gradient as well. But we're just going to stick with a solid color. All right, cool. So our city needs to kind of sit on a foundation. So that's going to be our first object. So I'm going to go to the cube, click on the cube, and then just drag here in the viewport. And now we have created our first object. So now if I continue clicking, you'll see that we're just going to keep creating cubes because we are in the kind of creation mode. So we don't want that. Instead, I'm going to undo and then hit V to be in the select mode again, because what I really want to do, I want to edit this object. So now if you hit and select, there are a couple of things you can do. So there's this little gizmo which allows you to move this object around. You can scale it. You can also rotate. So let's make it thinner. So I'm just going to grab one of these handles and make it very slim like this. So I'm essentially building like a concrete foundation for my cityscape. So this looks pretty good. So now I actually need more controls because I would like to bevel these edges. So I'm going to hit edit over here, and now you see that we have way more options. So you can do all sorts of scaling like this, but I want to bevel these edges. So I'm just going to click on this handle over here, which might look familiar because it's very similar in Illustrator. So if you click here and drag, you can see that now we're actually beveling these corners, and I'm going to make a nice rounded cube. So this looks great. I'm going to hit done, And now let's see what we can do with the properties of this object. Well, first, we can change the color, right? So on the right-hand side, as I said, in the appearance, this is going to be the first thing you can do. So you can change the color. I'm just going to use some dark gray. This looks pretty good. And then if I scroll down into the shape options, you can bevel, other edges as well. So for instance, the top corner is something that you also bevel like this, make it nice and smooth. You can also drill a hole if you like. I'm just gonna keep it like this. All right, so let's keep making objects. So the second one, I want to create something like a grass field, for instance. So I'm just going to hit Command C, Command V, and now we have duplicated this object. And you can see that over here in this little panel, you see we have two cubes. So it means we have two objects which are now kind of overlapping each other. So move this object a little bit up, and I'm going to scale it. And then let's change the color to maybe some kind of green color like this. And so now that we have two objects, we can start doing some fun stuff. We can try to combine them together. So here in the combine section, which you can see in the properties of every object, you see that we have two modes. We have the additive mode and we have the subtractive mode. By default, we are in the add mode, but we don't really see, any kind of change here. This is because the blending is set to 0. However, if I increase the blending intensity, now you can see we have started to combine these objects together, to kind of melt them into each other, which is really awesome. And all of this is completely non-destructive, right? So you can always just gonna go back and drop this to 0. So what I actually want to do is the opposite. I would like to carve the bottom object using the second one. So let's change the combine mode to carve. And then if I move this down, you see that now I'm actually carving the first object. All right, awesome. So now we have our kind of grass field. So let's keep on, let's go back. So let's keep on adding objects. So I'm gonna copy one more time, scale this object, and this is actually gonna be kind of the central foundation for the buildings. All right, so that looks cool. Before I start with the buildings themselves, I would like to add, some kind of bottom object here, which is going to be like a ground foundation, and everything kind of sits on top of that. So let's see how I can do something like this. So again, just going to copy this object, move it down. I want to scale it, and yeah, let's change the color to some kind of earthy tone. All right. So change this guy, for instance, like this. This looks pretty nice. Awesome. But I want to make it kind of more round. So a couple of options, which are going to allow me to do so. Again, I showed you how you can kind of bevel the corner by using the slider, but I want even more curvature. So instead of using this, I'm actually going to inflate this object. So I'm going to increase the inflate slider and make it really bubbly like this. So that's basically what I want. So I'm going to scale this down and then just going to place this object here at the very bottom. All right. So like this is going to be kind of the foundation for my city. Everything kind of sits on top of it. And maybe we can make it a little bit darker here. Awesome. So now we are ready to start building the city itself. So I said it's called the Hope Town, and it's actually going to be built out of letters. So another way to build up your scene in Neo. So as I said, you have primitive objects, which we have been using so far. But then the second way would be to create letters. So on the left-hand side, we can add text. So if you click on that, and then I can just snap, this over here, click and drag, and you can see we have created a text. Okay, I'm gonna hit V. So now I'm in the select mode again. And so let's see what we can do when we have text created. And it's a 3D text, right? Because we are in 3D space. So first of all, of course, you can change the input. So You can type in something like Adobe Live, for instance, right? But we only need a single letter. So the first one is going to be H, right? That's going to be our first building. So we're going to have 4 letters, and I want each one of them to take up maybe 1/4 of this central slab, so to speak. So I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger here, and then I can change the font as well. So in the drop-down menu in the properties, we have a selection of fonts over here. All right, scale it down a little bit. Maybe make it a bit taller because this is going to be a building, right? So that looks great. Love it. And let's keep making other buildings. So I'm going to copy this one, move it over here. I think they're maybe a little bit too big, so I can scale both of them down. All right. Select this one. And so the second one is going to be O. All right. So that's going to be O. Copy this one around. All right. Come on, you can do it. All right, there you go. So this one is going to be P. Add a little slowdown here. So for this one, maybe we can rotate this around. So something like this, I think looks kind of nice and cool, slightly more interesting. And then let's create yet another one. This is going to be our final building, which is E. So rotate this maybe all the way around. All right, and so that's our kind of final building over here. So let's see how that looks. So this looks cool, but it's a little bit boring because I feel like all of them are the same height. So I'm going to change the height now and make it look a little bit more interesting. So maybe this is going to be our tallest building over here. That looks kind of cool like this. And then follow with the P, and then finally H, somewhere kind of in the middle like this. All right, awesome. This looks great. I love it like this. So let's start playing with the colors. So this is kind of the funnest part here for me. So all of them are going to have different coloration. So this one maybe some kind of blue color. Nice bright blue. And so for this guy, maybe it's some kind of reddish color here, like this. And then this one is going to be maybe some kind of pink color. Great. So look, this looks pretty nice. All right, so now what I would like to do is also create copies of all of these letters because I want to make rooftops for each one of the buildings. So just gonna duplicate this, scale it down, and I'll do the same for all of them. So just gonna copy all of them. All right. Nice. So let's change those colors. Just gonna use some kind of gray color, and I can actually copy the value of this color because I want each one of these letters to be exactly the same color over here. Experiencing some slowdowns over here, but we'll make it work. I can do it. There we go. And then this is going to be our final one. And then we can start adding some windows and some details on our buildings. I would like to do one more thing here. I think it would be kind of nice to blend these buildings a little bit more with the foundation. So if I scroll down and increase the blending here, you see how I can kind of add some curvature here. So I feel like this value of maybe 30 works kind of nice. So I'll just use the same for each one of these buildings. All right, the properties panel is a little bit slow for me now. Well, let's move with the windows, all right? All right, so for the windows, I'm just going to use a cube and then carve that cube into the objects themselves. So just going to go here and then create a cube here. And I would like to maybe curve these edges just a little bit as this. All right. And then I would like to make a couple of rows and a couple of columns because this is a building, right? So it needs more than one window, of course. So just by scrolling down here, I'm going to show you another option which you can use, and that's the repeat option. So if I go to the array, I'm going to switch to linear. And now, as you can see, we have a matrix of objects that we are able to create. So we're essentially duplicating alongside X, Y, and Z axis. All right, so let's see what we actually do need here. So we don't need depth. So I'm just going to drop this to 1. I would like to have maybe 3 columns and 2 rows. So let's increase number of copies on the X. Actually, that one I'm going to keep it 2, but I'm going to change the Z distance to 3 like this. So this looks great. All right. Let's change the distance now. So make it kind of small like this. Reposition this. And then I'm going to change the distance on X as well. So basically the same one, 0.07. That feels like a good value. And then finally, I want to carve these windows into the building itself, right? So, all right, my properties panel is giving me some issues here. So I'll just give it a second here. And let's actually try to kind of refresh this scene. All right, so I'm going to change the mode into carve. And basically this is what is going to allow me to kind of carve my windows into the building itself. So that looks great. All right, so let's kind of keep adding windows to different buildings. So I'm just going to copy and paste. And now, just in order to see a little bit better, I'm going to change the mode to add. And I would like to add these windows on the second building. So I'm going to rotate the whole matrix here and then just reposition it over here. So that looks pretty good like this. And again, I need to go into the carve mode. So as you can see, I'm slowly kind of adding these windows. So copy again. Move on to this building over here. We want to add some windows on the, see now we are kind of, multiplying these objects in a radial manner. So I'm going to move them here in the middle and then change the distance. Let's zoom in. Perfect. Move this all the way down. And then I'm going to change the and you can dynamically change the number of repetition as well. So now we have 6. Let's add maybe 8. And I'm gonna copy paste again, and there you go. All right, so I think this looks pretty good. Let's add a few more objects, and then I think we're gonna be ready to go to Illustrator. So I would like to add maybe a huge sun, which is, behind the city itself. So for that, I'll just use a cylinder. So let's just use the cylinder here. Gonna drag and make it really big. Again, go to select, scale this object down, and then I'm gonna use these handles to rotate. I'm gonna click and hold Shift once again to have this snapping, which is gonna allow me to be, kind of precise. Rotate a little bit more, make it bigger, and then I just want to move it over here all the way kind of in the back. So basically, I'm building a composition for, for this graphic like this. All right, that looks pretty good. It is a sun, so we're gonna change the color of the sun to maybe some kind of nice orange. I love this, nice and fresh. And I think the final element, we need some clouds, right? So for the clouds, I'll use the sphere shapes. All right, so this is going to be super easy. So click and drag, I'm going to create the first sphere, and now I'm actually going to just keep on adding objects. Keep on adding objects because I want to build a stylized cloud shape using this method. It doesn't look like much right now, but I promise we're going to make it look pretty good. All right, cool. So I have all of these guys, and let's gonna select them all together. And I want to move them over here. And now the only thing we need to do essentially is blend them together. So let's start doing that. So I'm gonna go to my combine and then just start blending them together. And as you can see, now we're actually getting more of a cloud shape here. So it's just so much fun to play with this. And you can always go back and kind of reposition, make this one maybe a little bit bigger. Copy paste as well. Blend a little bit more. And there you go. We have our little cloud. So now I'm going to select all of these spheres and then hit Command G. And that way I have created a group. All right. So now we have a cloud group, which you can group, move it over here, rotate around. All right. So I feel like this composition visual mode, change this to something like illustrative pixel art. But what we really need, SVG format, so in vector format, and that's going to allow me to go to Illustrator and just continue working in the 2D environment. Before I do that, I actually want to change the shadows because I've noticed that we have the sun in the, allows you to rotate your shadows around, as you can see. You can also change the height, you can change the shadow distance if you're in the realistic mode. But I want to kind of, position these shadows so it looks like the sun is kind of shining from behind. So maybe something like this can work. Yeah, something like that I think is pretty good. And now maybe a few extra tricks. I'm gonna change the sun so it's maybe a little bit bigger and move it over here. A few final tweaks with these clouds. I'm trying to kind of imagine how this is gonna look like on a t-shirt, but I won't be able to, I won't have to imagine for long because that's why we'll use another 3D tool to really kind of visualize variations. And for that, we're going to go to Illustrator. All right, so once you're done with your scene, basically you're going to go to download, and then here you're going to be able to basically download, your scene as an image file or as a video. So I need an image, but I'm going to switch to SVG because I want a vector file. And let's go with something like 2000 by 2000 pixels. I want square aspect ratio. And now you see, it's very useful now to have this frame. So now I can really kind of frame the scene within the frame. All right. So the only thing we need to do is basically just hit download. And now we're downloading this scene as an SVG file. Awesome. So now that that's done, let's go to Illustrator and continue working there. All right. It seems like we're back online. Sorry about that. A little technical glitch. Converted our scene in a vector file. So now what I'm going to do is essentially just drag and drop this SVG in Illustrator and let's see what we have. Awesome. So this is the scene that we made in Neo. So do so is essentially do some. All right. I'm sorry, everybody. It seems like we have some technical glitches, but hopefully we're back online. So I'm here in Adobe Illustrator, and as I mentioned, I've created a scene in Neo, and now we can continue working in 2D. All right, so I would like to use the recolor function in Illustrator to create variations. So I'll keep the first version because I feel like it looks pretty good. But now I'll go to my artboard tool and then just copy this artboard a few times. And then let's now play with recoloring. So I'll just select everything here in the middle and then go to my recolor. And for this, I'm going to use generative recolor. So this one, I want to go after something like vintage colors, for instance. So let's see what Illustrator gives us. All right, so maybe something like this. I love this one. All right, cool. And then the third one, let's zoom in. The third one, I want to go with something completely different. So for that one, I'm just going to use something like Tokyo Neon, for instance. Let's give that a try. Awesome. This works great, I think. Sweet. So now we have created, three completely different variations in terms of the colors. Of course, you can choose to continue working on your design, just as you would, typically in Illustrator. But I'm happy what I have right now. So the final thing that I want to do is I want to try and see how this design can work on an actual t-shirt. And for that, we're going to go to Adobe Substance 3D Stager. So first, let's save this. So I'm just going to save it here on my desktop. And I'm going to call this decals, for instance. It needs to be in the Adobe Illustrator AI format. So that works. Save that. All right. And so now let's swing to Adobe Substance Stager. So I'm not going to go, into detail about Adobe Substance 3D Stager, but this tool also allows you to, create a 3D scene using existing objects, and then you can apply materials, you can play with lights, but it's aimed for a more realistic look. We're going to use a very simple scene. As you can see, we have our viewport. We have just a simple plane over here, and that's going to be our table, so to speak. And we're going to place a 3D model of a shirt on this table. So just to make it a bit more interesting, I'm going to go to my, kind of starter content here and look for a wood and just use one of these preset wood materials. So drag this in here, and this looks great right off the bat. Now, as far as the shirt goes, well, for that, let's go back to a web browser. I'm going to use Substance 3D assets. So if you have a Substance license, you have an access to Substance assets, which include materials, models, and lights. And we don't have the limitation in terms of the downloads that you have. So you can just go crazy with this. So let's look for a shirt. And I actually want to use the first one here. So I'm going to download this set over here. Perfect. And then let's go back to Stager. So basically what I want to do now, just drag and drop this file, this 3D file, straight into the viewport. All right. So as you see, we have 4 different versions of the shirt. I really don't need all of them. So I'm just going to delete most of these. So let's see. Flat one, we actually do need that one, but the rest we don't need. Perfect. So I'm going to reposition my shirt somewhere in the middle and then zoom my camera. And this is essentially the scene that I need. So from here, I'm able to apply some material on this t-shirt. And then finally, we're going to go back to our decal that we have created in Neo and see how everything kind of sits together as a composition. So first, I don't really like this material, so I want to change that. So I'm going to use some kind of fabric. So let's search for a fabric. I feel like I had some nice jersey material. I think it was this one over here. So drag and drop this material onto the shirt. And there you go. Now, I think the pattern is just way too big. So I'll change the repetition to something like 7. So you can kind of still see the threads over here. Looks a bit more realistic. And then change the fabric color to maybe some kind of grayish color like this. And let's frame the camera a little bit. Actually, I can create a new camera. So let's say that you want to create some kind of, images for your web shop. You can absolutely do so. So for instance, I can do something like 2000 by 2000 pixels. So you have a square aspect ratio here. And that's my t-shirt. So maybe this is the composition. And then now I'm literally just going to drag and drop the Illustrator file that we have just made straight on top of this shirt. And there you go. So this is our design. It's working as a vector file, as a texture file here in Stager. So now you can reposition this. I can scale it, move it around. I can use this handle to really kind of rotate this guy around. Gonna make it a little bit bigger here. But now this is the coolest part. So let's say that we want to try different artboards that we have made. So if I quickly go back to Illustrator here, if you remember, we had 3 different color variations and we saved that within the same file. Well, in Stager, you actually do have an access to all of that. So if I go to my image over here, image input, you see under the artboards, I can switch from artboard 1 to artboard 2 to artboard 3. So now, and you can have as many as you like. So this gives you a really easy way to kind of prototype different variations of the decal, but also you can change the color of the shirt as well. So now I can go back to my material and then change. Let's say I want to try something like a black shirt, for instance. And now there you go. I can also start rendering. So for instance, if I want to create a more realistic look of my scene, I can just hit here ray trace. And then if I go back to my camera, I can introduce something like depth of field. So I can go really fancy with this, right? Gonna zoom in closely. And then let's just set the focus point right in the middle over here. So now, Stager is kind of processing the image in a more realistic style because we're using the ray tracing mode. And then, of course, you can always kind of go back and then, change your artboards. You can even, kind of edit this image. this decal. So if I click edit, it's actually going to bring me back to Illustrator. Well, it's going to open up another Illustrator here. We don't need that, but you're able to establish a live link between Stager and Illustrator that way. All right, so with this, I'm going to conclude my session today. I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize for a little bit of technical glitches that we had, but hopefully this was fun. All right, gotcha. So now, since we have a little bit of extra time, I'm actually going to go and maybe add a little bit more details, and I'm going to show you one more thing you can do in Neo. So let's switch back to our browser and go back to our scene. So here I would like to add maybe a few more elements here, which are kind of fun. So I'll switch to the realistic style right on. And so first I want to show you how you can change some of the material properties. Water. Well, if I click on my grass field, and here in the material, we can kind of drop down the roughness. We can make it reflective, and I'm going to change the color to maybe some kind of blue color over here. So now it's a little bit hard to see. Now we actually do have reflections. So you can see over here that we're reflecting our city here. So as you can see, you can change more than just the color of your object here. Let's hide the frame. And then let's add maybe a few more objects, because it seems like we have a few extra minutes here. So I want to add 2 trees over here. So for that, let's use a cylinder. All right. And as you can see, you can very easily reposition your object just by clicking here in the middle and moving this object around. So I want to just move this object over here. Click edit and kind of scale it up. So what I'm building is essentially a tree trunk. All right, hit done, change the color, maybe some kind of nice brown color. And now let's build a treetop. So for the treetop, I'll use this egg object over here. So let me show you that. So there you go. So that looks kind of cool like this. And now I'm just going to edit this object just a little bit. And then change the color again. I think this tree is a little bit too big, so I can group everything together. And then I can make the whole group smaller as this. Well, let's change our water back to a grass field because it doesn't make sense for our tree to kind of sit in the water. So turn on the roughness back. And then I want to kind of blend this, kind of tree trunk with the base a little bit more. So I'm going to reposition and then increase the blending as so. So now we have a cute little tree over here. So now duplicate the entire group, and I'll create a few more trees over here. Copy again. All right. And so far we've been using the vector mode when going from Neo to Illustrator, but we can also change and use something like the pixelated mode. So let's see how this would look like, for instance, on our t-shirt. So yeah, so I forgot to say that, vector art and pixelated art both can be converted into vectors. So let's download this guy. So SVG, download. Perfect. So I'm gonna go back to Illustrator now. And here is my file, as you can see in Illustrator. So let's delete the background. And maybe what we can do is we can just create another artboard over here. So let's create another artboard and really kind of clear this. And move the content of the pixelated, scene. Move it over here. There you go. And then finally, let's do some recoloration of this one. I could try playing maybe with this kind of color wheel, and see if we can get some interesting result here. I can also change the number of colors. So right now it's in auto, but we can switch to like 5 colors, for instance. And you can even unlock this and then experiment with colors this way. Okay, I kind of like this. And then I'm gonna save this file, go back to Stager, and then I'm just gonna reapply the same file right over here in the image input. And then we should be able to have an access to the 4th artboard, as you can see. And yes, we do. And so this is our pixelated version. So now we can kind of play around with that one. And then let's see how that looks with maybe a different color of the shirt. So here, the fabric color, I can, maybe take a sample from here somewhere. So maybe it's going to be, I don't know, let's try this blue color. Perfect. All right, everybody. So that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely had a lot of fun. So this was, a way to show you how you're able to seamlessly blend from a 3D environment into your classical, graphic design background in Illustrator, and then go back to a 3D environment yet again in order to prototype, something like, like a design for a t-shirt. I really hope you enjoy this, and see you next time.